Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to take a look at a game hot off the GMT presses, just arrived last week, called Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea. It's a game for 1 to 6 players, and it involves area control and manipulation as you spread across the Mediterranean in the ancient days of yore as one of 10 different possible civilizations. It's a unique take because it doesn't fit into a lunchbox style game like Fort Sumter, but also is not nearly as complex as, say, Coin Games or some of the standard war game fare from GMT. I've known about this game for about a year. I've been extremely excited for it to come out, and it has. So without further ado, let's take a look what's inside the box.
Alright, let's take a look at the components inside of Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea. First, you have the extra wide map, which covers the entire Mediterranean area. You'll notice it is composed of 2 boards that lay abutted to each other. Each one has this wonderfully artistic terrain of the Inner Sea, and you've got different areas that'll map to the different civilizations that you can be a part of. We have the turn track, which you'll use, and in a curious fashion, you won't always know exactly when each epoch ends. There's sort of a random, hey, press your luck to see if it goes all 4 rounds or if the fight ends early. We have white components. The white they're kind of multi-purpose cylinders. They're used for money, talents to say, loot. They're also used for cordoning off areas of the map when you are not playing with a full deck of 6 players. And then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different colors of components that you can see. And then there are, of course, barbarians. You gotta have barbarians. It's part of every delicious, nutritious meal in an ancient game. And then you've got 7 wonders, each with their own block, and each of these 7 wonders can be procured, not by playing 7 wonders, but by playing an action that lets you build a wonder for 5 resources. And we have each player getting a special custom civilization with their own special abilities. Think Actual Civilization, the PC game, and you'll understand that each of these has some sort of value at some point in the game during one of the phases. And in these cards, you have a place to put your units that you're going to place on the board. You've got treasury, where you keep your talents that is used to fuel a few different things. And then you have loot, which, yay, loot is cool. It is loot. Then you have I am loot. We have the rulebook, standard stuff. Notice it's incredibly thin in nature. I wish I was that thin. Playbook, which is incredibly thick for reasons that will be made known later. You also have an extra sheet for everybody, a nice quick sheet for everyone to have that's playing the game, an event table for what events happen at the end of each epoch, and a solitaire player aid, double-sided. If you've been a good boy, then you can play solitaire. And that's it. That's it, except for one other thing, and that are the cards. The Fate deck cards here is a huge, huge, thick list of cards that each player is going to have a deck or a hand of that have special abilities, all kinds of special abilities, or special actions, or the ability to negate special actions, etc. So here what we have is, and this is what we're going to be demonstrating, is a 2-player game, and I picked one of the many scenarios that gives us a small section of the map. Now notice that these white cylinders, as I said, they were multi-purpose. One of the things is they cordon off the map area so that when you're playing with fewer player counts, you will have a smaller area to work with, which means more contention more quickly. That doesn't necessarily have to be true. There are scenarios that basically let you take the whole map and just see how far you can stretch it. But think of this like when you're swimming at the Y, and they're like, hey, you got to stay in this area. That area is for the old people, and the old people stare at you and like angrily because you exist. Anyway, but that's it, and that's how we're going to start the game. So one of the things that I wanted to address specifically about this game is one of the comments that I've noted more frequently than often from people who are anticipating it or have seen previews of it, in that it is boring and simple. I can't speak to a lot of things, but before we even get into the playthrough, which will be made known, I wanted to sort of reconcile to the fact that yes, it can initially look like it's not actually doing much, like it's very simple and limited compared to what you might have seen for pictures of, say, coin games and such. But I guarantee you, this is what I found. If you look at this, and part of it is fueled by these cards change everything and can change your impression. For instance, I had a game called Ethnos, which I purchased secondhand, and I did that secondhand because I thought, wow, this looks kind of really boring, and the art is nondescript, and it just looks like, well, disc shoveling and stuff. But then I got the game out, and I set it up, and I played it, and I realized I was absolutely right. But not in this game. This game is different, and I'll tell you why. Because when you're looking around here, and it looks boring initially, and this is where the brilliance of this happens, is that you've got this turn, and then you're just thinking, I'm just a poor boy, nobody loves me. He's just a poor boy from a poor family. These cards come into play like massive volcanoes, bribery, profits, volcanic eruption, sands of time. They come in and they just throw things for a loop, and you see the rhythm change from light to like harsh, and that's what happens during your turn. So I wanted to sort of specifically call out and say that if you are initially looking at this thinking, it's boring, you might be able to make a claim that it's simple, more simple than you'd like, but I definitely would disagree with people who say this game does not have interesting things going on, and really it's fueled by these power cards that really just, wow, they just take the game to a higher ethosphere of action. So let's get to an actual playthrough. Okay, we're ready to start. Now, the civilizations in this particular scenario are Troy, hi Troy, and Egypt. And Egypt, of course, is down here in Egypt, and Troy's up at Troy. The initial layout allows some flexibility, but for the most part, you're laying your cylinders, and these are sort of your control pack. You have a dashing number of these to begin with in your reserves, your arsenal. But to begin with, in most scenarios, you'll take 12 and you'll place them in certain ways. Now, here's the interesting thing. When you have one, you have what's called a camp, and that just gives you sort of presence. It doesn't give you anything beyond just saying, "Hey, I'm staking my claim. I put my quarter on the arcade table, etc." Then, when you add a second one, it becomes a settlement. Now, a settlement is sort of a gateway to your income. You will earn more discs by having these settlements, and too cute. I mean, some people don't stack them on. I probably, for purposes, shouldn't have, or should just lay them out here. But 2 is a settlement. 3 is a city. Now, while this actually helps you with, say, income, the income of more discs, having a city of 3 gives you victory points during the victory phases where victory points are accrued. And so you want cities, but you also want settlements, but you also need camping, because as you're spreading out, you're going to need to spread your influence around. And so that's one of the driving forces as you play the game. And one of the interesting aspects is how you expand versus, like, horizontally versus how you expand vertically into victory point opportunities. So let us begin. We've rolled the dice of fate, and Troy, Purple Troy, will be our first. Now, Purple Troy has a special ability that says, as long as 2 Trojan discs occupy Troy, cards cannot cause the forced removal of Trojan discs from Troy. Also, during the acquisition step of your growth phase, which is you will get into later, if there is a Trojan city in or adjacent to Troy, you get a talent. That's pretty good. That's highly talented. Once per turn, at the beginning of a competition, which is really the combat phase, you place a white disc into Troy and another white disc into a contested land area occupied by a Trojan disc. Now, what does Egypt do that makes it oh so special? Well, Egypt's a little simpler. During the acquisition step of your growth phase again, If an Egyptian disc occupies an area containing the depiction of the Nile River, there's 3 that do, then you transfer 1 disc from supply to the ready box, so you get a little beefed up there. If an Egyptian city occupies a Nile River area, you transfer an additional disc and you get a talent. So the Nile River is how you're going to do it. The ancient Nihilists have spoken. All right. Now, let us begin. We start each civilization in turn order does what's called a growth phase. Now, that involves things like retiring. If you spread too far, you can pull pieces back as long as they're not part of a city. Cities are kind of emblazoned there, and there's a special step for that. But you can pull pieces back. Right now, you don't want to do that. We want to spread out. We don't want to contract. But if you're running low on resources, you might feel like doing that. That's for a later game. Then you acquire. You transfer from your supply, from our supply here. We're going to transfer coins into our ready box for every land settlement. And you'll notice I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 settlements. So that gives us 5. You get 1 disc for every 2 shallow areas we occupy. 1, 2. So I get an extra disc there. So now I have 6. And then you get 1 disc for each opposing civilization we are adjacent to, which is right now nothing. And of course, if we have a wonder or a civilization displayed effect that allows us to do it, then we're fine. Now in this case, notice again that during an acquisition step of our growth phase, which is what we're in, if there is a Trojan city in or adjacent to Troy, I gain a talent. And that's unfortunately not where we're at. We don't have a city there yet, but we'll change that. Okay, then I may transfer 1 disc from any number of my cities to my ready box. That's another rare thing. You won't do that often, I don't think, at least in the early stages. It's really sort of a, I don't want to, scorched earth, I don't want to give this up. I could use that. There's reasons, but they're pretty contextual why you'd want to do that. Then you deploy. And then you can deploy into any area you control or that is contested and I occupy. Contested means that there's more than one players' discs in a certain area, and there's at least one of the people in there has 2 discs. They can coexist. You can have coexistence going on right now. Like, this is perfectly legal, no problem. Everyone can be here. Once you add a second one, then you have a contest, because then they're starting to take root. They're not just nomadic anymore. Also, you can go into an area that's adjacent to an area I control. So I can go here. I can go here. And then I can also into an area that's contested, but only if I have as many discs in that contested area. Well, adjacent to where I'm contested, but only if I have as many discs in a contested area as each opposing faction. Once again, that's a contextual thing. We won't dive too deep into that as I'm displaying the game at a high level. So we're going to make Troy into a city. We're going to put 2 here. And then we're going to spread out to Minos. There you go. We have now deployed. And that's it. Now it's time for Egypt. And Egypt's going to do something similar. Egypt has to count up and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Plus its extra ability that says if I have a disc occupying an area of the Nile River, I transfer 1 disc. So not only do I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I get 6. Yay! 6 discs. Alright. And then, of course, if an Egyptian city occupies, that will be for later. We're not going to mess with that now. Alright, I didn't bring one out. I don't want to... Yeah, we're just going to deploy now. So, I do want to make a city, and I'm going to make a city right here in Egypt. Yay! I'm going to make another... I'm going to make another... Let's get some more resources here. I do want a city here. And I do want to... Victory point there. Yes. So now I've got cities all along the Nile. There we go. And that is the end of the growth phase. Now we're going to enter what's called the card phase. And this is where it gets wild. Okay, again, in card order, we have what's called in turn order, we have what's called the card phase. This is where each player can either build a wonder, play a card that they have in their hand, or pass. And what you passed, you passed. And so what we're going to start off with is this. So Troy is going to play Improved Plow. It's going to gain 1 talent, and then place one disc into each of up to 3 different land areas I occupy. So, gaining a talent, look at that talent, and then into each land area I occupy, well, there's one there. We can let's make another city right there, and we will, it has to be a land area, so we'll go, what the heck, let's make a city here. All right, and that card is done. The card is discarded. Now it's time for our other Egyptians. All right, now, well, we're gonna play something nasty. We're gonna play Storm at Sea. Dun dun dun. Select a sea area, remove all discs from that area, and then remove all discs from up to 2 sea areas adjacent to the chosen area. Storm at Sea, well, that's easy. It's here and here. So we're going to remove. Take that, Troy. All right, that's it. Now we're going to go back. Now, do we actually want to build a wonder? We might. Troy's a little... Nah, Troy can do this. Is it wise? Probably not. Troy wants to build a wonder. He picks the mausoleum. So the mausoleum, he's going to place mausoleum in Troy. He's going to take this card, and this card says, when built, place 5 discs from the supply. At the beginning of my draw step, I can remove a disc from this card. If I do, I shuffle the discard pile face down, drop to 3 cards at random, put one in my hand, and discard the rest. So in other words, this is a nice way to sort of be more specific about the cards I get. 5 discs from supply. Yeah. 5 discs from supply. So basically every turn we're going to get a little extra boost. Now it's going to cost me 5. I have to take at least two of the cost from here and put it back in. But the rest can be either talents, 3, or cards. And I'm going to do Sea Route from Britain and High Priestess. Which would have been, it's kind of nice. Negate cards are cool because they have specific things they can respond to any card except an event card. So that's actually pretty cool. I'm going to keep that one. I'm going to get rid of refugees because I think that one's... There you go. All right. And now we're done. Now it's time for our turn here. And now we decide what to do. Do we want to spread widespread plague? Remove 1 disc from each of up to 4 contiguous land areas? Of course we do. Of course we do. We want Troy to get bored. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. All right, look at that. We pretty much demolished Troy's ability to have a good time right now. And that's the card phase. Now, it goes back and forth, like I said, until you're out of card. If you don't have any options, you have to pass. Once you've passed, then we go on to the next phase. And that phase would be the competition phase. Let's talk about that now. Okay, we're going to have a tournament. Okay, at least we're going to describe the competition phase. This is where battle happens. Once all the card play is done and you've wreaked havoc or had havoc wreaked upon you, then competitions are basically any area where there are multiple factions and at least one of those factions has more than 1 disc. So it's like I said, it's perfectly fine for everyone to camp out together, have s'mores and weenies, but once someone starts settling in and claiming some territory by having at least 2 discs, then things get a little heated. What happens is competitions are resolved from the top corner here all the way to the bottom corner of, well, wherever we're going to play. Now this is interesting. In the most basic form, a simple competition example would be that at the start, every player can place face down some cards that have a specific C on them, competition cards, and then they have to announce if they're going to use any special abilities from their player boards. Only Troy has one. And then wonders. There are certain wonders that also allow you to do that. When that is done, then they resolve in order of wonders. So if you had a wonder, its effect would trigger. If you had special abilities from your card, they would trigger. Competition cards would trigger. Once that's done, whatever you have left, you begin removing simultaneously discs based on the amount of discs for each faction. So as an example, 1, 2, 3. So you start off by saying remove every faction that has just 1 disc, it's gone. Okay? Then every faction that has just 2 discs, gone. Okay? Then every faction that has 3 discs, gone. And once every faction has had at least has had 1 disc removed, that's it. Then you repeat it and you go, okay, is there any resolution? Is there only 1 left? Or is there only camps left? Then no. Well, then we keep going. So there we go. 1. So it gets removed, and now you're at a state where you've got only 1 faction left, and that's the end of combat. Now what's interesting, and I will roll this back, is that what often happens, because it looks like it would be pretty simple to predict combat, is the extra addition of those cards. So for example, at the start, Troy says whenever a competition begins, place a white disc in Troy and a white disc in another contested area. Yay! That's one factor. 2 are the cards. Now look at this. This siege, so Egypt wanted to play siege, and without it being negated, then it says, if the competition is a land area, select an opposing civilization. During this competition, that civilization can't discard cards or pay talents in lieu of losing discs. Okay? So why is that interesting? Because here's the thing that happens, is that makes this sort of a gamble, a war of who's going to blink first. A game of ancient chicken. Here's what it is. It's time to remove. We're into the play. We played our cards, and now it's time to start removing discs. Okay, Barbarian, you're gone. Now, Orange goes, you know what? I am Egypt. I don't want to do this. I'm going to discard a card instead of discarding a disc. Haha. Take that, Troy. And then Troy's like, well, I got to get rid of this disc. This was my... So now we go to the next round. And we begin again, and you can continue to exhaust cards or talents or whatever to try to avoid having to get rid of cards. And why that's interesting is because you can wind up looking at a situation that seems like it's a no-brainer win for you, but through the use of clever card play and by trying to get rid of other resources, if you really want to keep that place, you can fight until you exhaust every opportunity. And then, over time, through attrition, you eventually can get down to where there's only 1 winner and 1 loser. At the end of competition, some lucky dog's going to win it. And that's a very basic example of competition, but you'll see that all the way through as you play the game. It goes a lot faster than I'm describing. So what separates winning from losing? Well, we have to wait till the end of the game to decide that. And then we count up victory points. But here's how it goes. At the end of every turn, there's some cleanup, as there always is, turn order, resolution, and then we go here. Now on this, at the end of 2 turn, when we're going from 2 turn to turn 3, they have a curious thing where you draw a card. If there is a 2 in that number, 2, 12, 22, etc., then the epic ends. Like, forget turns 3 and 4, forget that. Ha ha ha. Then you do an event, and you go to epic 2. Same thing with turn 3, except in that one, it has to be, if there's a 2 or a 3 in that number, then it ends. And so you never really have an expectation that you're going to do all 16 turns. It is possible to do 16 turns. It is also possible to do quite a bit less. And so you're always going to have to measure that and not try and do too much far planning or have the expectation that you can count on going the whole distance, when in fact the game could end, or the epochs could be much shorter to ending. And when that's done, victory points are counted, and whoever has the most wins and becomes Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea stud. Alright, that's it. Let's get to my final thoughts on Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea.
Okay, final thoughts on Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea. Let's go over the cons first. I like to do that before I go to the pros. Hope that's not an imposition. Again, I already touched on the is this game boring looking, it must be boring thing. I think I can assure you that it would be a mistake to assume that. The fate cards and the general controlled mayhem more than make up for any impression that this is less than meets the action eye. I think it would also be a mistake to call this a light game superficially, because it's not light in its breadth. It's a full game. A full 6-player game will take hours and hours. It just won't feel like it. And finally, it's not a civilization game. Again, it's an expectation setting issue. If you were hoping for Sid Meier's Pirates or something along that vein, this is not it. There are essences and flavors of civilization behavior in this game, but that's not really the core of this very neat game. So that's really it. There's not really a lot negative I could find personally. Let's get into the pros. Now, the biggest thing for this, the thing I love about it, is the action. Absolute action. You feel like when your turn starts, you feel like you're sort of in the hurricane eye. You're like sort of meandering out, putting a few things out, and then bam, let's go hunt some orc. It's just this crazy card play. Massive amounts of things are happening. You're trying out one hand to guard against getting hit with something nasty versus throwing out something nasty versus holding on to cards versus using them for wonders or paying off battle debt. And then when that's all done, you clean up your mess so your mom won't complain about the room, and then you go out and do it again. Make a mess. Set up a mess, make a mess, clean a mess, over and over and over. The cards, oh my gosh, the artwork on the cards is exquisite. It's just, you want to dive into the artwork. It's so vivid. It's so in your face. No one's going to ever forget they have a volcano in their hand. You'll know it. The rule book, the playbook, I tend to have a high respect level for people who can take the Herculean task of creating precise rule books of non-trivial game rules and making it work in a way that's easy for the reader. This is no exception. In fact, I think it's a sterling achievement in written form for the rules and the playbook and everything that's in there. I like that the game is not all war and not all peace. Despite appearing less so, you do have some flexibility in how you flex your civilization's muscles or mind share across the board. Big thing, freedom and growth. You can build up. You can build out. You can do a combo of them. There's not a complex, restrictive movement requirement. It almost feels so much like fluid dynamics, where you're just spreading out and like liquid out of a vacuum. On the hand. So you're spreading out a little bit, and I love that nudge of like, I'm gonna move my piece. One of my pieces is going to next to one of your pieces in this region, and mind if I cuddle up here at your campfire? And then after a while, someone comes along and they want to put another of their cylinders there, and like, mind if I build a few townhouses and put in a sewer? Yeah, I do mind. And then finally you have the, mind if I boot you out? Will I build an Eiffel Tower or two? That's the kind of growth and kind of pattern that just makes it so they're not just discs. Even though this game is described as abstract, it does a tremendous job of not feeling abstract. Sure, at its guttural level it might be, in the same way like Santorini or some other games can do that kind of like, we're really just an abstract game, but we're beautifying it so much you won't notice. Here, I just think it's so distinctive and descriptive that while it might have an abstract underpinning, it feels like an adventure. It feels like a night, like a vivid saga in the ancient world of Mediterranean regions. Scenarios. The wealth of scenarios is a treasure trove. It's not unlike Talon 1000, another GMT game that took the original Talon, a fantastic game, and then added just Cambrian explosion of different possibilities and scenarios and things that just brought it alive. I would not play Talon without Talon 1000. This is the same way. You've got staged scenarios that recreate historical scenarios, sandbox scenarios, and even your standard play, and all of those are tailored to player counts as well. And so you've got this sort of deep set of scenarios to play beyond just this, beyond one simple scenario. It's mighty. Victory conditions, well, hey, a victory condition is a victory condition. You get the most victory points. They vary, but the game is so vast in the possibility, and it's also flexible in how it executes, that you can choose ways that you want to like go after victory points in really interesting ways and differently if you choose so every game. The player counts are not a lie. I love this. How many times have you seen on a box, 1 to 6 players as some mythical desperate attempt to shoehorn the game for any extreme outside of 2 to 4 players? 6 player here is an epic battle. It's everything you want it to be. Even with turns being short, it will take a long time, and you'll love it. You really will when you're dealing with all the back and forth chaos and catastrophe. Hopefully, someone else is not you. 1 player, the solo player. Oh my gosh, you're just so refined, so mature, so entwined with the general play that you don't feel like you're getting stuck at the kiddie table as a solo player. You know what I mean? Like, go get Solo Boy over there a couple Thanksgiving turkey bones and at the rest of his kitty table. No, that's not how it works. So that they can just put one player support in the box. No, it's there, and it's there just as mightily as 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 player counts. So solo players rejoice. Finally, the biggest thing, the nail in the happy coffin, it's fun. This game is stinking fun. There's types of fun. I mean, I have fun. You play games. I play some games with a frown while I'm having a good time. Coin games are like that. Or other games are like, You're enjoying it, but you're deeply enjoying it in this sort of like, how am I going to maneuver around this situation? And everyone's having a jolly time frowning around the table. This is the type of game that you play with a sinister smile. That's this game. This game is I have a volcano, I have earthquakes, I have ways of making you cry. And then take that, and hey, what do? You can't do that. Oh, no. This game was born for grudge matches. It's just flat out fun. So with that, let's get to my final thoughts, as if you couldn't guess. All right, final thoughts. If GMT decided to make Seven Wonders, this is what I think I would envision, is that they would have this baby here. Yeah, I could see it. It's really interesting because GMT as a company, I mean, when you look at the extremes they have, you got your games for the youngins, you got your Battle Line, and you got your Fort Sumter and your Maneuver, and yeah, I'm characterizing there, but saying these are simple, lighter fare that are very quick to play, nothing. Then you got your Elders with your Storm over Asia and your Fields of Fire and all these games on the more complex side, and that's great. Love those too. This sucker is sort of like this mild midlife crisis red Corvette of a game that you take your friends out and show it off. You feel good about yourself. You're driving around, wind in your hair as you're sticking barbarians into someone else's shores. I don't know. It's great. It's like I could sense the zeal and the anticipation that went into this game every ounce through it, from the time I opened the box to the time I finished playing it over and over and over. It's almost as if the creators just kind of, as they were building this game, just started realizing that all the right pieces were coming together, and once they sensed that, they just amped up the desire to make every corner and door of this game even more perfect so as not to derail the masterpiece that I honestly think it is in the GMT line. It's Go meets beer pong, traveling around with sandals and spears. Honestly, I highly recommend this game to any audience who is not dead set on GMT's more complex fare. Purchasing it would be both justified and ancient. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.